All right, this episode is a power pack.
Oh my gosh.
Three things.
I know. Well, first of all, the most important part is that this episode is with my dear friend and former colleague, our dear friend.
Truly.
And former colleague, Carl Swart. And if you know Carl, he is just such an amazing guy, very positive, very people focused. His passion for leadership is so genuine.
So genuine.
And he's one of those people that after you've spent some time with him, like you just feel lighter, right?
Yeah.
You just feel lighter and more peaceful. So this was such a great episode.
Yeah. Carl knows how to develop people.
He does.
Elevate people. So what are we going to get? We're going to get three things out of, well, a lot, but I'll give you kind of the summary. How to create a culture in your organization that creates energy, number one. Number two, really taps the collective brilliance of your people. There's a lot of brilliance in your people that just don't get access to unless you know how to do that. And then finally, of course, drives performance. That's what we're going to touch on in this episode. Are you looking for a positive influence in your personal or professional life?
Do you need some inspiration?
Hi, I'm Colt Briner.
And I'm Sarah Armstrong.
We're on a journey of elevation.
Learning and sharing what we discover about how to live fulfilling lives and bring out the best in those around us.
Join us as we explore multiple perspectives, ideas, and influences on our own personal journeys of elevation.
Well, hello, Carl Swart.
Hello, Sarah Armstrong.
It's a pleasure to see your face. I'm excited to introduce you. I always say I'm excited. I'm going to come up with another word.
We do that, yeah.
Always.
But there's always a reason.
I know, but I am so excited. So two things. I'm excited to invite Carl and introduce him to be a guest on this particular episode. I'm also really excited to be here in person with my friend Colt. This is our first us in person and Carl on video. So we're excited today. And Carl,
it's going to make this one special.
Yes, it definitely is. Carl and I and Colt actually worked together previously in a previous organization. And Carl and I in particular became fast friends and really deeply bonded over like-minded thinking about teams and culture and leadership and just doing good things. So I'm happy to explore all of those topics. We are happy to explore all of those topics with him today. So welcome, Carl.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be with you and a pleasure to spend a little time together because it's been some time since we've been able to do so. That's great.
It has been.
As Sarah mentioned, a long time ago, and I call it a long time ago, it's really been just a few short years. We connected in a way inside of an organization to build something new. And so it was an incredible experience, not only with Sarah, but also with Colt. Colt and I sat many times in the office just brainstorming and thoroughly enjoyed that with you, and a great opportunity to learn and to grow from the two of you. Both incredibly knowledgeable about your craft, and also you're always searching and learning, looking for new learnings as you grow in your own career. So thank you for allowing me to be a part.
Well, thank you, Carl. Well, go ahead. Yes.
Do you know how when you look at your calendar at the beginning of the day, just to give a sense of what's coming up for me today? Whenever I saw like a meeting with Carl on the calendar, it was like, yes, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah. You just knew you were going to have a good day.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good time.
I had a similar feeling about Carl, but I would say we traveled a lot together.
Oh yeah, sure.
We did.
And so rather than seeing a meeting on my calendar, it was typically a dinner that would turn into a late night because we would sit and just talk forever.
Sure would.
And we tackled so many topics.
We sure did. Yeah.
And sometimes the next morning I would still be sleepy because we would be up so late. But
it was good times though, wasn't it? I mean,
it
especially
really was.
Talking about the people and talking about the next steps with each one of them and the clients and how we can engage with them easier and better. And that was an awesome experience. Incredible.
Yeah. Well, thank you for agreeing to join us today. And we really want to pick your brain and hope that you will share your experiences and knowledge with our listeners about elevating a team. Mm-hmm. And I know that this particular topic is something that you're very passionate about.
I am.
You have implemented a number of very specific team building activities. You're very intentional about the culture that you want to develop inside of your organization and specifically inside of your team, even if it's not the broader organization. So can you just give us a little bit of like Carl's philosophy of building a team and elevating a team?
Well, I'll tell you why this all started. So the passion really started early on in my career because I noticed that there were certain leaders that really drove the equation. And when they walked in a room, all the air was sucked out. Now, good or bad, it just kind of happened, right? And so they were driving everything. And I realized that there were so many people that were sitting around the table that had a significant amount of experience. And those folks had something to say. They really, in that environment, pulled back and didn't necessarily share certain things that I knew were on their hearts and on their minds. And one of the things that I thought was when I become that leader, so as we all move into those spots within our organizations, I want to make sure that I'm drawing people out rather than pushing them away or not eliminating, but kind of, what's the best word for it? Diminishing their input. And Sarah, that's something that I just loved about you, because when you walked in a room, there were so many people that had things to say, and you always had the ability to just kind of give them enough of a push that they begin to talk, and all at once you've got a great dialogue. And instead of one person and one person's ideas that might be brilliant, now you have 10 people and 10 people's ideas where it's a collective brilliance. And I really want to focus on that, is collective brilliance, because we have so many folks that look at a situation and they'll say, we're going to find that individual hero. Mm-hmm. In organizations that we've all been a part of. Let's find that person that can do this. Who's the one that can take this and run with it? Instead of thinking about it as from an organizational perspective and thinking about it from a purpose-minded perspective of developing all of those people. I love the comments from your previous guest about an organization that's purposeful, and they have the purpose in mind all the time. Well, now, you've got a group of people that have a purpose. And so developing a team that can really dig into details and really dig into the essentials associated with that product or with that project, it becomes exciting to walk in the room. I remember us talking as well, Sarah. I'm going to pull out so many memories from our conversations because there was a lot of meat in those conversations. One item we talked about a lot was when you walk in a room after the meeting, are you more energized about this next step or are you less energized? And how many times do you have organizational meetings where everyone walks out of the room just deflated? The energy has been sucked from them. And a goal of mine has always been, you get that team together and you're prepared and they are prepared. And because of that the dialogue that happens and the energy that's generated, everyone walks out with additional energy rather than now they're trying to rebuild their batteries.
Yeah.
So that's where it started, was seeing that a dynamic of a good, solid team creates energy rather than pulls it away.
Yeah. And I've always felt like that was my role as a leader, right? That was a lot of what we talked about, was that rather than the leader being the person that supplies all the answers, the leader really is the person that supplies the energy, right? Creates that energy in the room. Yeah.
That's right.
Great.
Yes. Yeah, so it sounds like two key benefits that you're pointing to: the collective brilliance benefit, right? Where you've created a situation where you're not just benefiting from the loudest person in the room's ideas, but you really have created a situation where all the great ideas that could exist in a team have a chance to reach the surface, so to speak. And then the second key benefit, it sounds like, what we're talking about here is that, as you said, you leave a meeting and everybody's, their energy's increased rather than decreased. I mean, those sound like some pretty significant benefits.
Yeah, they are. They are. And especially when you've got a fast-paced organization where if everyone has to recover after every single meeting, good luck, right? I mean, it's just,
Right.
it's not going to be scalable. And you're going to end up causing all of the folks inside of the organization to, over time, really not want to come to a meeting. And you want the exact opposite of that. As the leader, you want the meetings to be very purposeful. You want them to be very designed. And the team, as they walk in, the team understands and knows what to expect from the leader in that situation, but also the expectation away from those collective meetings. Because a team that has different people, and each individual, and this is something that Sarah does exceptionally well, is the individual giftedness. And so I'm gonna kind of go to that collective brilliance a little bit. You've got a person here that's very analytical, and you've got another one that is very relational, and another one that is just a blocking and tackling person. Allow them to dig in, and they're going to take the ball and run with it. And if you try to force a person that is not gifted in a particular area to do something, then the next thing you know, you're dragging down the energy of the entire team. And so I take a lot of effort. A leader needs to take time to get to know their people, and not just give them a personality test, not just give them a test that says, here's where you fit on an Enneagram scale, but to sit down with them and connect with them, because everyone is on a continuum. There's no one that is in a particular category. Everyone has multiple categories. And so the leader gets to know them and puts time into them. And if you know how to and work on a skill set for yourself on asking questions and becoming a discoverer rather than someone that needs to be discovered, then the next thing you know, see, I learned a little bit, didn't I, Sarah?
You did. I'm so impressed.
I learned this from Sarah. I'm not.
Okay.
And by the way, anything I talk about, I stole, because there's not a creative bulb in my body.
That's not true, but you are very learned, right? You are a seeker of knowledge.
So. I study, yes, and I study people, and I study situations. And so for those of us that are out there that think about the impact of interaction, and you think about the way that people are going to react and to respond to every situation, every scenario that you throw out in front of them, if you're prepared with that type of a thought process, then you're going to be able to help and become a helper and a supporter rather than someone that is drawing from them. And that's something that I think really happens with a well-developed team. It takes a significant amount of time to develop a strong team, because it's all of those interactions. The individuals not only need to understand themselves and their role inside of the team, but they also need to understand the impact and the way that team reacts and responds to them. Mm-hmm. And if they don't have that broad-based understanding of the team influence, then your team isn't going to be as effective as it could be.
Yeah, and I'm thinking back to something that you said actually several minutes ago about when people leave a meeting deflated.
Yeah.
And really what happens, at least my understanding of human behavior and the way that the brain works, is when you can feel and observe as the leader, you feel the shoulders slump, they kind of sink down in their seat, right? You know what that looks like when somebody looks deflated. Their brain kicks into survival mode. I'm just trying to survive this meeting, or I'm just trying to survive this day.
That's right.
And the chemistry of our brains is designed in such a way that the creative part of your brain completely disconnects when you're in that survival mode. So even if they have brilliant ideas, they can't even articulate them or bring them to the surface because their mind is so focused on just surviving.
So true.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What I wonder about is, so the slump shoulders, and somebody who is kind of intuitive with people and their energy can spot a lot
Yep.
of the things that you're talking about. But I'm wondering to hear from you, Carl, whether it's relative to not having a collective brilliance situation, or it's relative to creating meetings that are draining rather than energizing. I'm trying to educate the audience here on what are the signs, right? So the slump shoulders is a strong sign,
Sure,
right? Just
sure,
even
sure.
if everybody's walking out of your meeting just destroyed, you're like, I might have a problem here. But I mean, I don't know that I've personally ever walked out of a meeting that way, though I have felt defeated in meetings. So I'm curious if you have guidance on the signs that opportunity is present for a leader and for an organization on either of those two sides, that collective brilliance side or the devastating meeting side. What are some of the subtler clues that there's opportunity present?
Well, I think one of the major clues is the posture of the individuals.
Okay,
So
sure.
it's not just about the interaction. So you mentioned that you've got a slumped shoulder. Well, if you've got somebody that's leaning back and they've got their arms crossed, that's a pretty good sign. And
Yep.
especially on video, if you see somebody turn their video off, then you've got somebody that's disengaging, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And especially if a sign of a good team is also a team that in meetings they establish their rule set for those meetings. And when someone stops following the rule set for those meetings, then you know that you've got somebody that isn't engaged. And rules are things like, everyone comes prepared. And if that individual has, and we use something called a JIRA board. I don't know about others, but
Sure. Yeah, JIRA.
Okay, so we're an agile organization, and if someone is walking into every one of their meetings unprepared, then you know that that's got to be a conversation off to the side, because that's someone that is either overwhelmed or they have personal situations that are driving their emotional state at that time. Are there things going on in their lives that are causing them to lose their ability to think? I'll give you a great example and this is me personally. I went through a situation where my heart was racing, and it was racing because of the way that I'm made. It was a fascinating thing to learn. But because of that, I was taking medicine, and that medicine was causing me to drift. And so I'd be in the middle of meetings and completely lost. Well, so, to have someone come and say, hey, everything okay, is an important connection that each individual leader needs to make with their team members. And so if someone's, so not prepared. Another one of our rules is that you have to have your video on at all times. So if the video goes off, we know that there's something that's going on. Another item is that after the meeting, there are particular items that are takeaways. Those people that are responsible for the takeaways, we expect that they're going to follow up with other individuals. So if they're not following up, if they're not taking that next step, then that's an important indication that you've got someone that's disengaging. So those are three items
good signs,
pop to mind for me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Carl, when you and I were working together, we read a book at the same time that I know, because of our subsequent conversations, was highly influential in
it was big.
your development of teams. So can you just talk about that book and what it meant to you?
Sure. It's called A Team of Teams. And the book itself was about a situation that General McChrystal came across during his tenure as the head of Special Forces. And it was the fact that there are all of these incredible teams that were going out into the field. They were all A-plus teams. The teams would go out, might be a SEALs team, might be a Ranger team, other teams. They would come back with information. They would rate themselves as A+, and yet we were losing the war. So it drove him to say, what is going on here? I've got exceptional performers. They're out there performing their service. They're doing it at an exceptional level, and then they aren't meeting the goal that's been established for them. And so what he went through a significant process of determining the reason. What fascinated me about the book was that it was all about culture and developing, tilling the soil so that individuals could become a part of a collective, and that collective would end up performing and meeting the end goal. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, I think the thing about that book that was, when you say collective, the thing that was so impressive to me was that they started to anticipate each other's thinking. Yes, right? It was that level of cohesiveness. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. Please go ahead.
No, but in order for them to anticipate, they had to develop an infrastructure that would support that anticipation. Where before they may have been collecting a significant amount of data, that data was never used and it wasn't shared, and there was no cross-pollination inside of the structure. And he took all of that data and information, and with his team, they developed an infrastructure that was wide open. So it resonated for me that open data, as much as possible, instead of hiding and keeping silos of information and data that all of your experienced people are pulling, pull all of that information together into a data lake, and then mine that data lake for important tidbits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to do so, which informed the teams. So these exceptional teams were getting informed. They were getting informed at a faster pace. And so because of the turnaround and the iteration of data was so fast, they ended up being able to anticipate their own. They began to group think collectively, but they were also able to anticipate the reactions of the enemy. And you see the exact same thing happen with highly developed teams in the corporate world, where those teams are able to anticipate. And without anticipation in our corporate world today, there's no way that we're going to be able to be successful. We really have to be able to be nimble and adapt quickly to the dynamics, especially in healthcare. And that's where our DNA resides, is within healthcare. Healthcare industry for so long has been behind the times. 6 years behind where the rest of the rest of some organizations have gone, the financial world or some of the other areas. And as we begin to develop these highly attuned teams, we're going to be able to respond to those situations much, much better. It's a non-siloed environment. It's an environment that uses the data and uses it across all various divisions and subdivisions inside of the organization. And then that organization then pushes the decision-making down inside of the organization. Because now the experts have the data. There's no reason to have a hierarchical decision-making process. And so if you have a procedure that allows for folks to make those decisions, they can move forward. And there's no reason to get others involved in the process. And I really believe in learning organizations. We have talked about that quite a bit, that a learning organization increases the skill set of each individual inside of the organization. So Team of Teams showed me, you've already got elite status on all of those folks that were in those elite forces. Well, within companies and with our organizations, we have to raise our people, establish those expectations, and lift them to a higher individual skill level. And as we do so, then we're able to push the decision-making down into the organization. It's very intentional training, and it takes a significant amount of time to create all of those connections across all the people. So this is not, I want to emphasize, this is not a short-term fix.
Yeah.
If you want an organization to be scalable, then it has to be intentional, and you have to push for this type of an environment, this type of a culture over an extended period of time. It could be 2-3 years. It's not a 6 month financial, hey, we've got it and now we're good. It's developing people and really bringing them along together.
So one of the things that Colt and I have talked about multiple times is the balance between investing time to do the things that you just described, that intentional team building, intentionally getting to know your team and massaging, right, the process in order to get the result that you're talking about, versus the pressure of constant execution of tasks. And I'm curious, from your perspective, how have you balanced those two things? Because you can't just focus on the people and not, because at the end of the day, we all have work we have to produce, right?
Yes. Yeah,
so how do you balance the execution of tasks and the development of the team to this status?
A conversation for another time is that term balance.
Oh, okay. Ooh, that's good. All right. So I just heard Carl invite himself back.
Elevate your balance. I'm excited for that episode.
Balance. What is balance? As a mother of multiple children and also a career-minded woman, did you ever have balance? As a career-minded individual that wanted to make sure that I was involved in my family's lives, in my kids' lives, I didn't have balance. Balance is something that you create, and this is very, very humble opinion, that you create based off of your own capacities. And you have to know yourself well enough to understand your capacities. And when you get a better idea of, okay, I'm going to be pushing the envelope for a certain period of time in this area. And so I don't want my glass ball over here to drop and break. I'm going to make sure that I understand, and I'm using that terminology, there are glass balls and there are rubber balls. Some balls bounce, life situations, certain things bounce, certain things break. And so you have to have the discernment to know what is going to break and what's going to bounce. But anyway, another story. That balance that is really off balance is something that we have to keep in mind all the time. Now, for me, I'm not a 40-hour-a-week guy. And so it's kind of whatever it takes type scenario. And if that's the case, then I want to make sure that I take a portion of that time and dedicate it solely to two things. The first thing I want to dedicate it to is self-introspection. So I want to be able to take that time to digest the things that are going on around me. And when it's all about execution, then you lose the ability to digest what is actually being executed. And at some point, you're going to get way out over your skis, and the next thing you know, you're not going to be able to perform anymore. And I have experienced that personally. So there's that piece of it. The second piece of it is to pour into others. And I think that if you're at a 60-hour-a-week kind of role, then 20% of that time should be dedicated to pouring into others. It's significant. It's significant. Yeah. So that means that you're spending 12 hours on a weekly basis, not talking about the tasks that someone needs to do, but actually talking about the skill sets that they need to develop. And pointing them in directions that might help them. And oftentimes, the skill sets that you're developing aren't necessarily the checks and balances of the day-to-day operations. What we're talking about now is social skills. Is this someone that really needs to be a part of Toastmasters because they need to work on their ability to speak? Is this someone that just needs to engage in tough conversations? So we place them in scenarios that are difficult conversations and have them walk through with you as a guide. So it's a mentoring, much more of a mentoring responsibility than hey, this is the project and we need these things accomplished within this period of time.
So This brings up a question for me because a lot of the clients that I interact with are early or mid stage. They're often just involved in, we just have to establish ourselves, for the next quarter, so that that's working. And,
Yeah.
we're trying to stand up systems, staff departments. I mean, they're really in that scramble, right? They haven't reached cruising altitude, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious if there are reliable phases or stages that an organization goes through where you begin to say it's time, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you would say it's from day one, or if you would say realistically an organization has to go through phase A and B, however you would describe them, before phase C, where you really should start to think about 20% of your 60 hours needs to be focused in this way. What's your thought about what those phases look like?
That's what a great question. What a great question. When an organization is young, and that is not determined on size, a young organization is an organization that is working as, we'll just call it individual heroes. They're unplanned, they're reactionary. The organization sees something and they say, something, we've got to make sure that we touch that right now because it's client driven. And if we fail the client, then we're done. We're out of business.
Glass ball.
Well,
Glass ball.
It's just immaturity. It's an immature way of looking at it, right?
That's right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And if the leadership has intentionality, then you're creating over time an organization that's going to be able to scale to the level that they want to. If they place it off to the side, and this is true of everything in our lives, isn't it? It's not. This isn't some incredible discovery that you need to make sure that you do it anyway.
Yes.
If we're going to exercise, then we set aside time to exercise. And oftentimes it's not the main thing that needs to get done. Do we still get the exercise in? It is the exact same thing. I would say that the cultural development and bringing people along is something that you do during the hardest times, because that's when they're going to engage and grow the most. That's when the stresses of what's going on will resonate with them more than an aftermath where, 2 years ago this happened, and now we're actually discussing the real reasons for that situation happening.
Sure.
Does that make sense? I know that's a little nebulous, but
I would say that not that you asked me the question, but I'm going to answer it anyway.
What are your thoughts on this topic, Sarah?
I think that the culture of the organization that is set at the top has to support the hardwiring of the of the activities and the discipline and just the general attitudes that Carl described. I think that it's much harder. It's one of those things that if you wait for the perfect time to have a baby, you're never going to have children.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I get you.
And so if you wait for the perfect time, now we have some capacity to focus on our culture, you will never focus on your culture. I think it just has to be hardwired.
It's interesting. Yeah, I agree. It would have to be hardwired. So I see so many organizations who have this sense of dire scramble, and that it's a nice to have. That it's in the nice to have category. Yeah. The intentionality, as you're talking about, Carl, it's so critical, right? You just have have to be oriented around that intent from day one.
Yep.
From day one.
And if you wait until you get an employee engagement score or some other survey result that tells you that you have a problem, you are way too late.
Yeah, it's so far behind.
Because by the time someone is feeling so I don't know if disgruntled is the right word, but has negative feelings about the organization enough to respond negatively on a survey, boy, you got a big problem.
That's so true.
No doubt.
So, anyway, that's
glass
just
door.
My 2 cents. Yeah. Well, yeah. Glass door. Yes. Anyway.
I do think, I think that people are also looking for that intentionality. I think this is a real millennial approach to business.
Sure. Yeah.
That us, baby boomers have a little more difficult time because we like hierarchy and structure. And what we're talking about is a very fluid organization. So you're talking about people that can handle conversations and can handle decision making that in previous roles and responsibilities, they may not have had that opportunity.
I
And
follow.
so I kind of want to emphasize that the team, yes, there's well-defined teams and supportive teams and teams that are very effective and they execute well. That's because of the individual team members and the way that those team members interact. So the capability of each individual is still extremely important.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So, Carl, have you? I want you to, because we like to tell a good story here, and I know you have so many
Story time.
personal stories about being a leader and the things that you've seen out of a team. I know from my own experience that this approach is so rewarding. That yeah, if you can like flip the switch in your brain, that it is hard. It's a hard habit to break, to kind of be in that execution mode. But if you can kind of flip that script in your head and really be that collective, the collective innovation, to have that kind of team building approach, it is one, creates energy inside of your team, but is so rewarding as the leader to see that come to fruition. Is there anything that comes to mind for you, a specific situation where you can look back now and be like, man, that was so cool?
That was cool. So I've had that on both sides. I've had
Yeah,
that
great.
is so cool, and I've also had the boy, I missed that one.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll go with that was so cool.
Well, you can tell both of them if you'd like.
In the organization that we were a part of, I experienced that. And even today, look back on those people that were ridiculously talented and taking all of those folks and pulling them together and creating a collective vision of engaging with the client and being able to touch the client. Um, it really started with a very small group of people, and there were we brought everyone together. There were 20 some of us that came together, and it was a vision casting session.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
And
I remember
so
this. I remember when this happened.
it was quite an event, and a lot of folks that questioned that event and questioned the
Necessity of it.
purpose. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, the necessity of that
Uh-huh.
event. But there were a lot of folks that were out in the field that I think that didn't quite understand their role and their responsibility. And we wanted to bring them all together and discuss what is the purpose behind who you are and what you're made of, because we're going to change it a little bit. And when we got together, our discussions, a big portion of our discussion was the DISC assessment.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
And
sure.
so we
Yeah.
did a disc, and all of the different, we mapped the disc, and we made sure everybody knew where they were as a part of the collective. And that was a great exercise. But then we took it to the next level of, okay, if this is your disc, then how does that fit within the overall? And how does your personality work with the person that's sitting next to you? And how can we collectively begin to work together so that we're not sitting in a client space all by ourselves? And from that, the group began to grasp what we were talking about, and especially 3 or 4 folks. Because what you find is that there are certain people that just, okay, they get it and they're going to run with it. Well, there were 3 or 4 that got it and began to run with it. And because of that, uh, that group ended up expanding. And I'd say from a client service perspective and a connection with the clients, we knew where our clients were. We understood exactly what their needs were, and we were looking to meet those needs proactively rather than reactive in nature. So the culmination was a small, just get together kind of discussion. And hearing that the thoughts that we had in that initial meeting they were completely absorbed by all of these folks that were a part of that discussion was just an amazing. It was like, okay, you've passed on the 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 insight, or now other people are shining that exact same light and taking it to their respective as they've grown inside of that organization or moved on to others. They've taken that information and moved it on. And that's something that really happens out of this, is that the leaders end up developing really good friendships with those people that are a part of the team. And so just last week, I met with Chris Mattingly. Sarah, you may remember Chris.
I do remember Chris.
And all we talked about was all of the things that we had put in place inside of that team and how he had used that successfully in his latest adventure. And that's just
that's
fantastic.
So cool.
That's fantastic. And he was a part of that first team. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I do remember, I wasn't at the event that Carl is describing, but I remember us talking about it before you scheduled it, and we had a long conversation about the agenda and the outcomes. And I remember looking at that team and thinking, that is a group of people it has full alignment, right? Like they not only did they rally around a purpose, but they rallied around a way to present themselves, who they wanted to be out in the field. Not just what did they want to do, but who did they want to be out in the field. And it was really cool. And I was very proud of the team at the time. I certainly am still very proud of them, but I echo Carl's feeling. It was really neat to see.
Yeah.
Well said. Said.
A minute ago, you briefly mentioned millennials, and this isn't necessarily a question about millennials, but it did bring this question to my mind as we think about either having a planned path for how you would develop people in a specific role, right? How you get them to the next level of their knowledge set and elevate them in their career position is potentially different from how they're interested in developing themselves.
Absolutely.
Right? So this is the way I would like to go. This is how I would like to learn.
Great point.
And maybe there is a millennial element to that there's sort of more of an attraction to, this is how I want to develop myself, rather than, hey, where's the next course I'm supposed to be taking, which may be more of a classic thinking. So regardless of the generational aspect, I'm interested to hear your guidance on how you as a leader seek to balance sort of the standard curriculum of development in specific career roles against sort of a person's own growth ambitions. How do you kind of work that balance?
So that's a difficult question, because in order to answer it, it's you have to really know and understand what that person has as a purpose for their own life.
Sure, great, yeah,
right. And so if we start there and we say, okay, let's break down the life skills in general. If we break down on the basic life skills, there's about 10 of them. And this is, time management and crucial conversations.
Sure.
And task development. Okay. So I like to make sure that everyone on the team is speaking the same language. And in order to do so, you have to understand your own language first. So we walk through, here are 10 life skills. And these are the life skills that we believe are necessary for a particular individual and their success. I talk about 5 quotients. So there are 5 areas of an individual that I think are extremely important. So there's the intellectual quotient. That's just your ability to process information, right? And then there's the tasks. That's your wow, I'm blanking, but I'll keep moving.
Like ability to execute, basically.
Yeah. It's. I'll get there. You can edit this out.
Like the technical quotient or tactical quotient.
The technical quotient. Yeah. So you've got the intellectual, the technical, You've got the social quotient, you've got the emotional quotient, and then you've got the adaptability quotient. And so there are, this is a way for us to communicate. We can come in and say, hey, I just noticed that in this last meeting, when we were talking about this particular area, you were pushing back on that. And so I'm just wondering, what kind of reading have you done about the patient interaction in the healthcare community as of late? Because you were really pushing back on the fact that we should do it via an iPad rather than via paper, just as an example. So, and that way you're able to say, well, this is a part of adaptability. So let me help you in this area. Here are some resources that I think would benefit you. Here's a reading that I just had on it. Here's a situation that I was just in that I want to share with you. And then also challenge them to go and find something that either is supporting their position or is supporting the position that the group was moving toward. Okay. Because I think that by defining the terms that you're using, you're going to be able to communicate much more effectively.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right. And oftentimes there are folks in the room that are speaking different languages.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Carl, I know we talked about Team of Teams, and that was a big book for you and how you developed a team at that particular period of time. But I'm curious, obviously, you've talked about your 5 quotients. You've talked about other key elements that have really helped you become who you are today, right? And I know you well enough to know that you are Carl. You are Carl at work, not at work, at the dance studio
totally.
with Julie.
I
Like
just
you
am
are
I am.
just Carl, right? So which is amazing. What are some of those influential materials that helped you become the man you are today?
So one is, and I don't know if plugging an organization is appropriate. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. So there's an organization called Focus 3 that's out of Columbus, Ohio, that is an amalgamation of Covey and of lots of other inputs. And they have put it into a very simple fashion, which I need. It's just kind of simple axioms. These are categories, and these are the categories in which people fit. And so, if we know that there are 10 life skills, then we learn those life skills. So, Focus 3 was very beneficial, and I'd highly recommend that organization. I know that others have experienced them and have had positive results. And then there are also those that have looked at it and said, well, not necessarily going to fit here, right? Yeah. So that's going to be an individual piece. So Focus 3 is one. A major influence has been Good to Great. Many people have used that, and so I know that I'm just repeating something that others also have done and have successfully done. But that organization really talks about energy, and it talks about the infrastructure necessary. And all I did was I took the individuals and layered that on top of an infrastructure kind of thought process. And so as leaders today, I think we need to do that. And this points to the millennial comment that you had, Colt, is that, we've got a certain structure. So there's an org structure that's out there, and there's an algorithm that can be placed on any staffing model. It's just how business works. Yeah, we can place the algorithm in there. But then there's the additional layer. And the additional layer is the team layer. It's the personality layer that overlays any type of structural component. So Good to Great, hey, here's how great organizations function. But then let's layer on top of that the knowledge from Focus 3 and the knowledge from other personality kinds of books and tools that resonate for the individuals. And that really will drive high performance, peak performance for not only the individuals, but for the organization as a whole. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, here comes my classic question, following Sarah's classic question. This is the get back to the office on Monday question. I mean, you've laid out so much guidance for us here. And oftentimes it's just like, where do I start? So whether it's a leader in an mature organization or a young organization, really would just love to get your guidance on what's the step I can take when I get back to that office on Monday. Because I am interested in getting the benefits of collective brilliance. I am interested in getting the benefits of people energized when they leave my meetings. Where do I start? Give me a first action.
First action is to say how you've got to assess your individuals on your team. No matter how large the organization is, you have to take a moment to look at those individuals realistically and see if you've got the core of something that can be special. If you have individuals that are not going to be cooperative in a collective environment, then that's an indicator. If you have individuals that are abrasive and they're going to need to have edges cleaned off, that's an indicator. So take a real hard line. I would recommend that you look at them from those 5 quotients. That's the criteria that I use, and put together a little matrix for each one of important characteristics in each one of those quotients, and then rate each individual and give them a score. After that, you need to determine what are the things that need to be impacted. So there are certain things that are absolutely mandatory, and they're mission critical. Identify mission critical items, put those at the top of the list for those individuals, and that's your next conversation with them. This
Great guidance.
You've got to move on it, and you've got to move on it quickly. So here's the mission critical items. These are the things that, in order for us to be a better team, I need you to work on. And always at that moment in time, you've got to open it up. So as a leader, you've got to say, okay, what do you see from me? So you need to get personal feedback, because you've got to get to know yourself better in order to develop the whole team.
I was just going to ask you about that. That's that axiom, before you look to develop others, seek first to develop yourself. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yep. And be consistent in it, right? So I think that a lot of organizations suffer from, I'm going to focus on this today because it's a hot topic. And then next quarter, there's a new hot topic. And so that one-on-one development starts to wane. I've canceled this meeting because I've got this, and I can't, now I have to try. And it just happens, right? And so it starts to dissolve. And so the discipline to not allow the things to interfere, it takes a lot of effort.
So true, Sarah. So true. And that's another resource is Measure What Matters, to talk about the organizational discipline around objectives and key results, goal setting, lots of different terms that can be used there. But if your organization is, as you mentioned, Sarah, if you're reactionary, then we're going to be all over the place. And the next thing you know, a team, and directionally focusing that team, it won't be possible because of the organizational dynamics. So there's a significant amount of discipline on both sides of the equation. Let's make sure that we're not going after the brightest light bulb, the next thing, that kind of
the
shows up.
Totally.
Yep. Versus let's stay focused on the objective, the organizational objective. Yeah.
Carl, this has been such amazing guidance. I mean, obviously you've worked very hard on your own career, and currently are, I don't even think we said this in the beginning, but you're Chief Operating Officer of ApprioHealth. Yes?
Yeah.
Still true.
Still true.
I mean, I haven't talked to you in a while, so I want to make sure that was true. And, I certainly have watched you grow and develop, and your attitude of, there's always something that I can improve upon inside of myself, just shines through. And your just genuineness in wanting to pour into others, I think really comes through in this episode. And I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to be with us today.
It has been priceless. Thank you.
Yeah, really a treat. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Greatly appreciate it.
Hopefully you'll come back soon.
That's based on your guys' invitation. Would love to.
Yeah, excellent.
Right on.